So my name is Mark Feary. I'm the curator at Artspace. We are here discussing one of Artspace's recently open projects called the Financial Report, which is a project that I've been working on for kind of the last 10 months, but I guess a show that I've been thinking about for the last 6 or 7 years. I guess that's an interesting place to start, just thinking about my earliest ideas about this show, which was about around before the crash in 2007, where I was kind of quite interested in the media attention paid to the investment value of art, and I was really interested in the way that artists were working. A number of artists in Melbourne, where I was based at that time, were kind of looking at what that relationship, their personal relationship, is to finance or to money, in kind of quite abstracted terms as well. Whether they're using it as a kind of as a kind of conceptual device or as some sort of form of critique against the hyperinflation of the art market. But I guess with the crash, I thought that the project had a little bit too, it became a bit too topical, and so I put it aside for a period. But I guess I'd been thinking about more recently, revisiting it for the very reason that what sort of happened in the post the crash, and its continuation, the sort of domino effect that it's having around the globe. I didn't really understand the kind of the reasons for this downfall. I understood it in simple terms, in terms of the over leveraging in the subprime market, but I didn't really understand any of these financial terms any greater than what I did pre the crash. So I sort of thought, well, how can we kind of revisit this as in a kind of an exhibition form, but then use that as a platform for furthering people's knowledge about finance or financial issues or economic issues, or how that sort of just plays out, because I think that many artists are kind of quite interested in that, and they sort of look at those things through the market of the art market, which is kind of the way that many people in the arts kind of look at as a sort of a model for understanding these much bigger ideas. I was watching this, I think it was a sort of an advertisement for Sotheby's in London, and they had a few kind of interviews with some of their staff talking about the fine role that Sotheby's plays in terms of calibrating an arts market, I guess you could say. And I quote, "I said once that if someone doesn't buy it, it's not art. I think I was referring probably to contemporary art, because contemporary art, it only exists when it is matriculated through the marketplace. Essentially, it is something which you have made until it has been anointed by the market." So it's Ian Robertson, head of business at Sotheby's Institute of Art in London. And I was kind of, I was really struck by the, I guess the definitive nature of that comment, but also it's kind of essential problematics that essentially it says that these things only kind of exist at art once they are within a context where they might be connected with a market for it, be that sort of primary or secondary. And I guess a lot of the works within the exhibition kind of play around with this, what this relationship might be between an artist or an artwork and an art market or collectors. And, subsequent to that also a public reception. And I think Denis's work really hits on, a number of these kind of ideas and sort of charts that in kind of a form of how that exchange develops. So to give that some sort of context, Denis Beaubois is a Sydney-based artist who, like many, we're very fortunate in Australia to have quite a supportive state and federal-based systems for supporting artists and supporting organisations like Artspace to survive, with the idea that it is for the greater good of a public. So Denis had applied to the Australia Council for the Arts for a new work grant. So it was a 20,000 grant to create new work. So he had a long-standing interest in kind of the idea of currency and that idea of like what an artist has in relationship to other members of and the public that follow a different kind of profession that invariably has a greater form of stability and financial remuneration. So he was interested in this, the idea of that money, like what that would mean for him. Obviously, it means a great deal. But thinking about how he could use that as a kind of an artwork in itself without kind of really changing its form in any way, but how he could make that enter an art market. So he had that money, and he sort of documented this full process, because that's, you know, obviously the thing that he ends up with as kind of both the kind of the artwork, but also the documentation of a process. So he went to a bank and had the money counted out in front of him in the bank, which he documented, and he'd requested kind of a series of $100 notes that they might all have been sequential serialization. And then he got in contact with the auction house Deutscher and Hackett to see whether they might be interested in the prospect of him offering that money, offering that currency as a work in itself, to go straight to sort of go beyond the primary market, to go just straight into the secondary market system. And, you know, through a series of kind of discussions with them, they quite happily agreed to this process, you know, knowing, I guess, or conscious of the fact that it had kind of a very interesting media angle inherent to it. And also, I guess, as an auction house, very conscious of, regardless of what that work sells for, beyond its $15,000 to $25,000 estimate, so beyond that $15,000 point, that they would already be making a 20% cut no matter what, you know. So no matter how what price that work enters into the secondary system, or as Ian Robertson says, matriculated through the marketplace, that they would always have their 20% cut. So there's, you know, it's lossless as a venture for them. So this all took place in Melbourne, and it was, you know, obviously the media had gotten onto it. It sold for $17,500, which with buyer's premium equates to sort of $21,500. So from which Denis's return, Denis Beaubois' return is sort of $15,900. So this, you know, obviously was covered by the media, the mainstream commercial media, and received, you know, quite a lot of media attention from, you know, a range of commercial television shows and news shows. And so Denis went on television, sort of talking about this as a gesture, you know, and it's, you know, they're not highly intelligent questions, you know, it's about how people kind of convert that idea from being like, you know, no, if it were any kind of object, if it was, you know, it could have been made out of anything, could have been made out of, you know, rocks and sold for $20,000, and it would not have had, at this point in time, have had, you know, nearly the amount of kind of public outrage. But because it's such a, you know, because the artist's hand is sort of so absent in this as a work, as an end work, and because everybody can kind of, you know, currency has such associative qualities for everybody, you know, what they would do with that money, you know. It sparked a kind of public outcry, to which, you know, the Australia Council for the Arts received, you know, numerous complaints, and numerous complaints were levelled at the, or sent to the Minister for the Arts, and so, you know, as in terms of good governance, the Australia Council's hand is kind of forced to kind of react, although, you know, in their favour they were always, they sort of maintained their support for the project. So we kind of chart through the project all of that documentation, including the you know, a sort of show reel of the media, but then also following that, the kind of a lot of correspondence from people in the public that had sent directly to Denis's website, you know, their kind of outrage at the idea of the genius of the artist, and the kind of, you know, the taxpayers' money being put to waste. And so it really sort of shows not, you know, not only that relationship of an artist to what it is they create, but also that sort of system in relationship to a market for it, and also its kind of public reception, but also its kind of institutional support as well.
Isn't this the same as all artwork? I mean, formally it's quite beautiful. It's, you know, a nice green, kind of minimal, kind of repetitive, you know, object.
Yeah, and, you know, it is, I guess, you know, essentially a ready-made, you know, so it is something that's happened for, you know, 100 years. It's really just that kind of the strong seduction that kind of money has. You know, everybody has an idea of what they would do with it. If it's not transferred, then it's not you know, nobody's kind of decrying spending $20,000 on stones. You know, they can really, its exchange possibility is so inherent within the work itself.
How much does an artist have to kind of engage with how much does cultural production have to engage with economics?
You know, I think artists obviously need to engage in economics because everybody has to engage in economics. You know, that is kind of the reality for everybody about living in a society like this one is, you know, a very prosperous and expensive society. So nobody can be immune to dealing with economics. It's really about, you know, the kind of way that we navigate what that relationship might be, and also the kind of the ethical concerns within that as well. So, you know, there's in my mind sort of no sense within this project that, you know, although it's nodded to within a number of the works, and I guess most pointedly within Melanie Gilligan's work, but you know, there's a real acknowledgement that there is a strong symbiotic relationship between art and economics, and that is purely for the reason that for everybody living in our society, we necessarily have to have a relationship to economics. We may kind of decry kind of the systems that we have in place, you know, late capitalism, but, you know, in the absence of kind of real tangible alternatives, then that is what we have to work with. And I think that's the kind of the subversive quality and the kind of humoristic quality in a number of the works, I think, is a way of just kind of working with that in a way.